Yo, what's going on, guys? It's Noah here, breaking down the Showdown slate on Draftkings for Week 12. We're going to cover the Monday Night Football game between the Rams and the Ravens. Does make for a pretty fun primetime game. Should make for a pretty fun game to watch. We'll talk through this Showdown slate, talk about all the plays that I think are viable. We'll hit on the quarterbacks, the running backs, receivers. We'll do that for all positions. Just before we do get started, guys, as always, I would appreciate it if you would drop a like down below. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you have not yet. Click that notification bell so that way you get notified every time I upload. Also, you can follow me on Twitter. Link is down in the description at DFS by Noah. Very active over on Twitter. If you guys want to give me a follow over there, I would greatly appreciate it. DraftKings is still running out huge tournaments for these showdown slates. I'm pretty sure they have another like $1.2 million tournament for this Monday night game. So definitely going to be playing these showdown slates. I don't play much volume, but I do try and get a little bit of volume down, especially now the NBA's here. I try and mainly focus on NBA on Mondays, but I still do play a few lineups on these showdown slates. Let's go ahead and start off at quarterback, though. Talk about the two quarterbacks in this game. We got Lamar Jackson at 13,600, and then we got Jared Goff at 8,400. So choosing between the two quarterbacks, I think both are viable, obviously. I mean, Lamar Jackson, the only reason you wouldn't roster him on this showdown slate is just given the price tag and the strategy. Playing a $13,600 quarterback on a showdown slate really thins out your lineup, especially if you want to play Lamar Jackson at captain. I mean, you're going to be really thinned out at what you're able to do with the rest of your lineup. He's 20,400 at captain. Plugging him in the captain spot only leaves you 59.20 remaining per player. So if you want to do that, you probably are going to have to play both kickers. You're going to have to play like one of these tight ends or one of these like wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3s that you don't feel very confident in. So I don't know if I'll be able to get Lamar Jackson in the captain spot, but I definitely like him as a flex play. He's obviously the highest projected player on this showdown slate. I mean, he's most likely going to give you anywhere from 25 to 30 DraftKings points. The dude just has so much upside. He's the best rushing quarterback in the league. Legit gives you 100 plus rushing yard upside. He can get the 100-yard bonus with his legs. He can also throw for 250 to 300 yards. I mean, the guy has 35, almost 40-point upside, which is crazy for a quarterback. So Lamar Jackson's a great play. Just don't know if he's that great of a play as a captain, given the salary and what it's going to constrain you with, like with the rest of your lineup. Lamar Jackson legit needs to score like close to 40 DraftKings points to be like the best captain play, and I just don't think that's very likely. You're probably going to be able to get similar production to Jackson for cheaper with someone like Cooper Kupp, or even Jared Goff's $5,000 cheaper than Jackson. You got Robert Woods at $7K, so don't think you need to go Lamar Jackson at captain. Looking at the other quarterbacks though, or the other quarterback I should say, Jared Goff, 8,400. Definitely like Jared Goff here, given the $5,000 savings you get between him and Jackson. If I can only play one quarterback, I'd honestly probably side with him, just given the savings. I'm not saying he's going to outscore Lamar Jackson, but saving that salary is going to allow you to fit in other players, like other receivers, like Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, those guys. So I do like Jared Goff quite a bit. Playing at home here in a primetime game, I do expect him to play well. He's always had pretty drastic home and road splits. Always been a much better quarterback at home. This Ravens defense hasn't been the elite defense that we've seen in past seasons. They're about middle of the pack against the pass. So far against the run, they have been pretty stout, though. I don't see Todd Gurley having a ton of success in this matchup, and I don't think Todd Gurley is going to be a priority for me on this showdown slate. If I'm going to attack this Ravens defense, I'm going to do it with pass catchers and with quarterbacks. So I like Jared Goff at 8,400. Definitely in play. Him and Jackson are obviously both solid plays. Choosing between like the running backs, though, just looking at the running backs, you got Mark Ingram at 10,200, Todd Gurley at 8,800. So Mark Ingram is severely overpriced in my opinion. He's not someone I'm going to be playing on this showdown slate. I just think he's way too expensive. He's very touchdown dependent. Like, rarely are you going to get a big game from Mark Ingram if he's not scoring multiple touchdowns. He scored 2 touchdowns in that game against Houston, had 23 DraftKings points, had 2 receiving touchdowns in that game. In the game where he had 18 DK points, he did get 115 rushing yards. So in order for Mark Ingram to be a good play at this price, he's going to have to get you, I'd say, probably 20 DraftKings points, if not more, and it's very unlikely he does that unless he's getting multiple touchdowns. If he is getting multiple touchdowns, it's very likely that Lamar Jackson is not scoring many touchdowns. So if you're fading Lamar Jackson, I guess it would make sense to play Mark Ingram because those guys kind of negatively correlate. So Ingram makes plenty of sense if you're getting away from Lamar Jackson. But obviously Mark Ingram's not going to be a priority for me on this showdown slate. He's just too risky. I mean, he doesn't even play that many snaps. The Ravens do kind of incorporate like different running backs into the mix. We can look at the snap percentage from the running backs from the Ravens just the last few weeks. I mean, you got Mark Ingram playing 49, 46% of the snaps. You're getting a little bit of Justice Hill, who's involved, 26%, 11% of snaps just the last 2 weeks. Gus Edwards is involved as well. Like, if I'm going to play a running back in this game, even though it's a tough matchup for Todd Gurley, I'll just play Todd Gurley for almost $2,000 less. Gurley at 8,800, you could definitely look to. He's getting a ton of volume recently, which we like. 25 carries last week against the Bears. Had 3 catches as well. Did get a rushing touchdown in that game. Had 21 DraftKings points. Gurley's been seeing very consistent volume just as of late, getting about 15 to 20 touches a game. Makes plenty of sense at 8,800. Still don't think he's going to be a priority for me, though, on this Showdown slate. I really like Cooper Kupp at 9,800. I like Robert Woods and Brandon Cooks all the way down here at 7K and 6,600. So I don't think either running backs are going to be priorities for me. If I had to choose one, I would go with Gurley, but I don't think I'm going to be eyeing either one, especially like if I'm only playing one lineup. I don't think I go to either Ingram or Gurley in that one lineup. You do have Gus Edwards down there for really cheap, who is playing a decent amount of snaps. I mean, he's 2,600. He got 8 carries last week against Houston. A lot of that had to do with blowout. I mean, they won that game by 34 points. I know Mark Ingram didn't get a ton of work in the second half because of how big they were winning that game. He had 8 carries, 112 yards. You obviously can't predict him to have 14 yards a carry in this game. So, I mean, Gus Edwards, even though he's playing like 40% of the snaps, it's hard to have a ton of confidence in him. Unless like a Mark Ingram injury or something happens, you're not going to get a big game from Gus Edwards. So I really don't want to go to any running backs in this game. If I had to choose one, though, it would be Todd Gurley. Now the receivers, I think this is where I have a lot of interest. I really like Cooper Kupp at 9,800. I think if I'm going to choose a Rams receiver to go to, he's the guy that I want to go to. Like I said earlier, if you're going to target this Ravens defense, you want to do it with pass catchers. I mean, they're a pretty tough team to run on. Cooper Kupp has been like one of the heavily targeted receivers this season. I mean, we saw from like weeks 3 to 5, he was getting 12, 15, 17 targets. The targets have been down a little bit. It was crazy to see that he only got 3 targets in that game against the Bears. I believe Robert Woods and Brandon Cooks were both out that game, and Cooper Kupp only got 3 targets, which is very surprising. I was expecting a big game from him in that game. I think that was a Sunday night game. Kupp at 9,800, though, I do like quite a bit. He's probably one of my favorite plays on this Showdown slate. I like playing him at captain at 9,800. For 14,700 as a captain play, you can still get in the quarterbacks that you want. I mean, you can probably play both quarterbacks if you go with Cooper Kupp at the captain. So really like Cooper Kupp as a receiver play. Marquise Brown at 8K is going to be a tough one, or a tough sell for me. I mean, he just doesn't play a ton of snaps. He's not a heavily targeted receiver. He obviously gives you a lot of upside. I mean, he has a ton of like big playability. But I would much rather save $1,000 and play someone like Robert Woods or Brandon Cooks, who are just going to be on the field a lot more, are going to get targeted a lot more. Week 10 against Pittsburgh, you got 11 targets for Robert Woods in that game. He's obviously been getting pretty heavy targets with Brandon Cooks out recently. This is still one of the better receivers in the league, in my opinion. We know when Jared Goff drops back to throw, he's looking to Cooper Kupp, he's looking to Brandon Cooks, he's looking to Robert Woods. Those are the 3 guys who are going to see the most volume in terms of Rams pass catchers. So between like Marquise Brown, Robert Woods, Brandon Cooks, like I definitely take the Rams receivers over Marquise Brown at 8K, even though Brown obviously has a lot of upside. Just hard to trust him at that salary when you can get better targeted or guys that project to see more targets for cheaper. Brandon Cooks' first game back from injury. I don't believe he hasn't played since like week 8. Yeah, he played week 8 against Cincy. He only got 1 target in that game. I'm pretty sure he got hurt pretty early on in that game. I mean, obviously Brandon Cooks is a big play receiver as well. He's only had one pretty big game this season. That was week 3 against Cleveland, where he had 8 catches for 112 yards, 23 DraftKings points. You've only got, I believe, Brandon Cooks. Yeah, he's only scored 1 touchdown this season. That was week 2 against the Saints. I mean, he's been pretty inconsistent with the touchdowns. I guess there's some positive regression coming for him. If I can only choose one of the receivers, though, between Brown, Woods, and Cooks, I definitely like Robert Woods the most at 7K. Then you got like the cheap receivers who are pretty tough to trust, but I mean, they are really cheap and we're kind of desperate for value. Like I said earlier, Josh Reynolds has been playing a lot of snaps recently. We can look at the wide receiver snaps for the Rams. Obviously, that has had to do with Brandon Cooks being out the last 3 weeks. I believe Robert Woods was out last week as well. You did get Josh Reynolds playing 95% of the snaps that week. He played 95% the week Brandon Cooks was out in week 10. He's obviously going to go back down to his normal role of probably anywhere from like 25 to 30% of the snaps. Going to be very hard to trust at 3,400. I would much rather play Willie Snead at 3,200. Willie Snead's not a guy that gives you much upside, but you can probably project him for anywhere from 4 to 5 targets. He has been seeing pretty consistent snaps. I mean, just looking at his snap percentage this season, 65, 56, 71, 75, 69, 67, 63, 60, 47, 58. He's going to play anywhere between like, I'd say probably 55 to 65% of the snaps. Really, none of the Ravens receivers are on the field a ton. They kind of rotate in. Like, they'll rotate Marquise Brown in. They'll rotate Snead in. You'll see, like, Miles Boykin get on the field a little bit. You'll see Seth Roberts get on the field. They'll use all kind of different tight ends. So it's really hard to predict which Ravens receiver is going to have the big game. Besides Marquise Brown, all the Ravens pass catchers are pretty cheap. Or besides Brown and Mark Andrews, all the Ravens pass catchers are pretty cheap. You got Willie Snead at $3,200. You got Boykin at $1,600, Seth Roberts at $1,200, Hayden Hurst is $800. So, I mean, you could take flyers on these guys. If I have to choose one that I feel most confident in, it's probably Willie Snead at $3,200 just because I feel he's going to be on the field the most. He's seeing the most consistent targets out of all those guys. But if we do look at the tight end snap percentage, you're seeing that even a guy like Mark Andrews, who's been a great tight end this season, has been great for fantasy. He doesn't play a ton of snaps. Whenever he's on the field, he's out there to catch balls. I mean, he's not much of a blocker. They have multiple tight ends they'll use. They'll have Hayden Hurst out there some. They'll have Nick Boyle, who's been playing a large majority of snaps recently. With Mark Andrews being priced up to $9,200, hard for me to have a ton of confidence in him. Like, at that salary, like, I'd much rather play Cooper Kupp for $600 more. I feel a lot better with Todd Gurley for cheaper. So I don't really see myself going to Andrews. I could see taking a flyer, though, on some of these cheaper tight ends from the Ravens, like Nick Boyle, $3K. I mean, he's been playing pretty large amount of snaps these last few weeks. Just the last 3 weeks, 84, 77, 76% of the snaps. He's been targeted about 3 to 4 times every week. So 1 week against the Patriots, got 5 targets. He did get into the end zone that week. I could see taking a flyer on him, especially on a slate where we're kind of desperate for value. There's no great value that I see. All these cheap plays like Boykin, Roberts, Hurst, these guys are incredibly risky. I mean, you just don't know what you're going to get from these guys. It's hard to predict what kind of game they're going to have. So, I mean, I really like going to some of these cheaper guys like Nick Boyle for $3K, Snead at $3,200. If I have to choose like any values to go to, those are probably my favorite pass catchers to go to for cheap. You could obviously look to the kickers, $4K, $3,800. Kickers don't give you much upside, but, I mean, we've seen kickers be in the winning lineups recently, so especially on a slate where there's no value, I could see just plugging in the kickers as your value and kind of moving on. Tight ends, though, I pretty much covered the tight ends. With Mark Andrews being $9,200, not playing a ton of snaps, I mean, it's hard for me to have a ton of confidence in him as one of the top plays on this Showdown slate. Like, I'd much rather play Cooper Kupp. I'd much rather play Gurley. It's just, I don't see Mark Andrews making it into a ton of my lineups on this Showdown slate. Then you got the Rams tight ends who are pretty hard to trust. You got Gerald Everett at $4,800. Who's been getting somewhat consistent volume. I mean, he got 12 targets that game against Pittsburgh. I think a lot of that had to do with Brandon Cooks being out. His target volume's always tough to predict. I mean, we've seen weeks Gerald Everett will get double-digit targets, then some weeks he'll get 3 targets. 4,800, like, honestly, I think I'd rather just play the kickers. If I'm going to try and find some value, like, I'll just take the kickers who will probably give me 8 to 10 points rather than trying to take a shot on Everett, who you just don't know what you're going to get from. Like, Tyler Higbee hasn't been playing much recently. He's really cheap, but he's not getting much volume. He's not on the field much. Hard to have a ton of confidence in him. I talked about the other Ravens tight ends you could consider. If I'm going to go to one of them, it's probably going to be Nick Boyle at $3K just because he's been playing a pretty large amount of snaps recently. I don't know how many routes he's ran, like if he's out there just blocking or if he's out there actually running routes, but the fact that he's gotten 5, 4, 3 targets the last few weeks at least lets me know that he's getting targeted some. I mean, he got into the end zone against the Patriots. 4 catches, 78 yards, had a pretty nice game against Cincy. So he's probably my favorite cheap pass catcher to go to, but the cheap pass catchers are very risky on this Showdown slate. So I think we pretty much covered the player pool, all the options that I feel are playable. We'll definitely talk about like roster construction now. We'll see if we can build out a few lineups. I wanted to try and build out a lineup with Cooper Kupp at captain because that's definitely the strategy that I'm probably going to be doing like in my one or two lineups that I'll make. I'll definitely have one with Cooper Kupp at captain. 14,700 at the captain. If I'm ever going to play a receiver at captain or a pass catcher at the captain spot, I want to pair him with his quarterback. Usually that's the route I take. So I'll definitely be playing Jared Goff in the lineups where I have Cooper Kupp at captain. That leaves me 67.25 remaining per player. So there's ways I could go here. Like if I just want to plug in both kickers for cheap value and kind of just take those value plays since there's no great value, you could do that, and that leaves you 95.50 remaining per player. That would leave you enough to play Lamar Jackson. Once you plug in Lamar Jackson, you'd have enough for someone like Gerald Everett, who I'm not the biggest fan of, but you could plug him in if you wanted to. You could probably drop down. Like we might be able to get up to like Cooks or Woods if we drop down from one of the kickers. Let's take out one of the kickers, plug in Cooks or Woods. I did mention that I really like Robert Woods. That leaves us 3,150 remaining per player. Obviously, you're not going to feel great about these cheap guys, but it's a one-game showdown slate. Our player pool is very small. We don't have a ton of options to choose from. I think taking shots on guys like Willie Snead and Nick Boyle makes a lot of sense, and I believe I could get both of those guys in this lineup. I definitely can. We could go with Snead at 3,200, Nick Boyle at 3K. So that's a lineup that I like quite a bit. You got Kupp and captain, who's obviously a very high upside play. You got both quarterbacks. You got Robert Woods, who's a receiver that should see plenty of volume. You got two pretty risky plays in Willie Snead and Nick Boyle, but all the value on the slate is pretty risky in my opinion. So that's a lineup build I like quite a bit. I did want to take the time to see if we can build out a lineup with Lamar Jackson at captain, just to see what it's going to look like. So if you're playing Lamar Jackson at captain, I mean, you're going to have to play probably both kickers or go to like Boyle or Snead. I'll just plug in both kickers for now. If we want to drop down to Boyle or Snead, we can. But once you plug in both kickers with Lamar Jackson at captain, that leaves you 7,266 remaining per player. You could honestly probably play Jared Goff in this lineup and one of his pass catchers. Most likely Robert Woods would be my favorite guy to go to. If you were to plug in Woods, that leaves you 6,400, so you'd have enough to play like the Ravens D or Everett, which I'm not a big fan of. Let's see if we go up to Cooper Kupp at 9,800. That's going to leave us 3,600 remaining per player. That's honestly the route I'd probably go, because then you can play Snead at 3,200, who, like I said, I think is a fine value on this showdown slate. So you can definitely make it work just playing Lamar Jackson at captain. I don't know if Lamar Jackson at captain is the winning lineup, I'd be very surprised, just because if that's the case, you're probably going to have to get like double-digit point games from both kickers, which I don't think is very likely. I mean, just scrolling through the kickers' game logs, Justin Tucker 12, 7, 7, 12. I mean, if you get double-digit DK points from Justin Tucker, he's probably going to be one of the better values. Zerline as well has gotten double-digit DK points multiple times this season. So yeah, I mean, I think it's fine to play both kickers on this showdown slate just because of how thin the value is. And I didn't think it was going to be easy to get a lineup in with Lamar Jackson at captain, but you can make it work as long as you play both kickers and then one more cheap guy. I think I'd probably go with Willie Snead as my cheap guy if I'm going to play one of those values under 4K. But that's just kind of how I'm looking to approach this showdown slate, guys. It's definitely a tough one. I mean, the value's really thin. There's studs to pay up for, but when you have studs to pay up for and no value, that makes it pretty tough just decision-wise. You're going to have to make some tough choices. If you want to jam in these studs, you're going to have to play some gross value that you don't feel good about. I mean, you could go with like a mid-range build, like a Robert Woods at captain with Goff. I mean, I could see that. Let's see what we can do with Woods at captain. I think Woods does give you plenty of upside. You could play Goff at captain in that lineup. You could definitely fit in Lamar Jackson. You might be able to get Cooper Kupp as well. Once you plug in Cooper Kupp, that leaves you 3,850 remaining per player. You'd be just $100 short of getting both kickers in, which I could see doing. Or you could play one of the kickers, and then that'd leave you enough to play someone like Willie Snead. So that's another build you could do as well. But I think that's it for this showdown slate, guys. I think I pretty much covered everything. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. Hopefully it helped you. I usually just spend about 15-20 minutes running through these showdown slates. I don't play much volume on these. I've said that multiple times. I usually only play a few lineups, but these showdown slates are very casual player friendly. Like a lot of players like to play these. They're very popular. I mean, it gives you something to sweat while you watch the games, which is always makes it fun. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. I greatly appreciate it. Make sure you drop a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you have not yet. Click that notification bell so that way you get notified every time I upload. As always, you can follow me on Twitter. Link is down in the description at DFS by Noah. Very active over on Twitter. Feel free to give me a follow over there. But good luck on this showdown slate, guys. I appreciate you watching. We will see you in the next video. Peace.